Okay, it's recording. I'm Edwin Rutch, and this is a brainstorming session on the topic of what do empathic interventions look like in families. And this is for a concept that we're working on for creating a reality TV show that's similar to Super Nanny, except showing an empathic way of being versus that kind of tough love approach. And I'm from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, which is cultureofempathy.com, and perhaps we could each go around and just introduce ourselves quickly before we dive into this brainstorming.
Sure. I'm Amy Bryant of Parenting Beyond Punishment and Wild Child Counseling, and I just really think that this work's important, working with parents and children so they can learn to really enjoy their lives together. And I think a lot of that is, skill building and changing our view of children, and what does it look like to have empathic-based parenting and to work with our children instead of the sort of hierarchical top-down model that most of us do. So.
Thanks. Jump in.
I'm Kim Hopkins. I'm a clinical social worker. I'm the director of grants and a trainer for collaborative and proactive solutions through Lives in the Balance, and that's an organization that Dr. Ross Green started to advocate on behalf of behaviorally challenged kids and their caretakers to help show them that there are non-punitive, non-adversarial means of helping behavior.
I'm Robin Peters-Bennett, and I am a clinician. I work with children and adults suffering from the effects of early abuse and neglect and trauma. And I'm also the founder of StopSpanking.org, an educational site aimed at helping parents understand the dangers of spanking and also to understand what the better alternatives are, positive parenting, essentially.
So yesterday, Lori and Amy and I were talking. We were saying what was the best kind of topic to look at, and that's what came up was really what are interventions look like if we go into a family to intervene and create a more empathy-based family. Like, what does that look like, and what are approaches and methods and actions that we can do? Is that kind of how you saw it too, Amy? I was just wondering how if that was, if I was kind of hitting it.
Yeah, I think sort of brainstorming about what will we be doing with families. We'll go in and sort of what can families expect, what should we expect, how will we work together as a team here and also as a team with the family.
Okay, well, for me, one of the first, just jumping in, the first thing is setting the intention. It seems like that a family has to want to do this. It's like somehow some kind of a decision has happened that either things are so bad that we're finally willing to do something to have someone come in and kind of change the situation, or that they've become aware of the benefits of empathy, that they've maybe seen another show or have heard something. It's like, oh, empathy is really good, can really increase the well-being of our family. So those are kind of setting that intention is something that I've been kind of thinking about.
There's a really loud sound. Do you guys hear it?
Too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
it's in my house.
I think we had that problem yesterday with it kind of comes and it goes, and I think it was Amy.
It was. I was there yesterday, so it's probably me. Let me try well, I can't unplug because my battery's almost dead. Let me mute myself and see if it goes away.
Oh, no.
Gone.
Well, it's gone for now. We'll just have to put up with it. It's fine.
I'm going to move. Yesterday I was at the couch and it helped, so I'll see y'all on the couch.
Okay, excellent.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about intention because usually parents come to me when they're in pain and they're overwhelmed with their child, and so they're highly motivated to not be in pain. Now, they may not call it pain. They might call it fury and frustration, or they might just say they're completely overwhelmed, but that's usually what gets us open to doing something differently is when what's not working is causing us enough distress and worry. And I think that So parents are pretty highly motivated, I think, most of the time when they come in, uh, but they may be preoccupied with the child is the problem. And one of the things that I think has been real helpful for me is to help parents know that I'm there for them. I'm there for them as parents. And boy, do they just breathe a deep sigh of relief when they realize that, because then it's like, it isn't like there's just pressure on them to be better. I mean, they're already doing the best they can at the given time. Instead, it's like, I'm going to try to help make this easier for you so that you're not overwhelmed yourself, so you're getting support. That's usually how I begin. I don't know about you, Kim and Amy, how the intention gets set for you.
Yeah, I think we experienced a similar thing, that parents have been down a long road, that they've been blamed along the way, maybe by each other, maybe by school members. So they're looking to not be blamed, and I think that they are refreshed when we communicate to them that that's not what we're about. And they seem to be relieved when we introduce an alternative explanation for why their children are having difficult behavior that has nothing to do with who they are as people or what they've done with their child. Because we talk about lagging skills leading to unsolved problems, and then yeah, I think I actually don't picture having a hard time finding families who would be interested, if they know they're not going to be sensationalized, and they know that they're not going to be blamed, and maybe they're getting free help that maybe they couldn't get otherwise or afford otherwise or something like that. I think, Ross was just telling me that he's got so many clinical referrals now for his clinic side, that he can't see them all. So, I think that there's quite a few people out there who would be interested, as long as, like I said, they're not going to be sensationalized.
Yes.
And they're not going to be blamed, which they're not in these models. So.
I totally agree. How's the sound on mine? Okay.
It's awesome.
At the moment,
Okay,
yeah.
good. I totally agree. I think even just looking at sort of our different communities, we see, I don't know how many messages we get every day of parents saying, I want help, I need help, what can I do? I love my children, I want this to work. And to sort of mirror what Kim was saying, that in this atmosphere of acceptance and not blaming and shaming parents, I think it's just going to be that much more people wanting to come do it. And
It's attractive.
Absolutely.
It's so attractive.
I mean, I even mentioned it briefly last night on our private group, and parents were like, oh my gosh, please do this. So,
Well,
I can't go into any details, but.
And if they know that it's not just going to work while we're there, that
Yes.
it's going to work after we leave, which I think, and I haven't done any looking into Super Nanny about if they do any follow-up with families and things like that, but a lot of her interventions are only working because she's doing them. And she's a different person, you know what I mean? Like, are they really sustainable? I tend to doubt it. So that angle, the sustainability, you don't need us to be successful with this.
Right, it's like she's giving them little tricks, little toolbox, things for their toolbox, but it's like, boy, you just wear those out pretty fast versus the true organic evolution of the human being. This is what's really happening, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about neurobiology, is it's like you create empathy, you express it and experience it through doing it over and over and over and over in a variety of situations. And so it's like it's truly something that has to be developed. But the beauty of the idea that, Edwin, you're talking about is that people can watch, and we are such monkeys. We really are. We mirror and learn that way. And I can't tell you how many things I've learned just by being able to see it done. Hearing about it, it's just like, yeah, I sort of get it. It's in here, but it's not like, I don't get the feeling. I don't get, how to do it. like really what it feels like when you're doing it. And there's something about watching other people do something that it's the mirroring neurons, you're sort of experiencing it. It's a fabulous way to learn. It's also a beautiful way to send a message to our culture and our community that we need to love parents and support them. So it also models for other people, how can I be more helpful to the parents in my life?
Yeah, that whole modeling, I think the show itself can be kind of an intervention of sorts, that every week or whatever you can go see this show, and it kind of trains you and encourages you to kind of go forward in an empathic way of being. So once the show is going, I feel it would be really easy to find people when they see the success of it. There's a little bit of a noise in the background. Maybe if you can kind of mute your microphones if you're not speaking.
My husband's home for lunch.
Oh.
Hi.
Rummaging around in the kitchen.
So I guess the other thing I was thinking is almost like an empathy toolbox. To create a toolbox is another concept that was coming up. A set of tools, and somebody mentioned about being heard, and that's been the core of what I've been doing, is the empathic listening, and various manifestations of it. There's the listening, me listening to one person, listening to all people in the family individually, and then bringing them together to speak together in different combinations, just a couple of people or the whole family together. And then, so the listening part seems to be a really core component of this, and kind of in various combinations of the listening. And that's kind of been kind of the core of what I've been doing. And getting people to also learn how to do empathic listening themselves, so that they have some kind of a method. And that's been the empathy circle process that is like in my own family and with others too. But it's been really effective, kind of having ongoing, in terms of that ongoing quality sustainability, is we have fairly regular empathy circles now about different issues, different conflicts that come up. And we use the reflective listening. So one person, shares and speaks to someone else in the circle, and then that person reflects back until the speaker says that they're fully heard. And then it's the turn of the listener to speak to someone, and they get reflected back. And it just kind of goes, around like that. Usually, if it's a family circle, we need about at least 3 hours for that to go through. And I know and we've also done circles around just what are our, like, just positive circles, not like a conflict circle, but we talked about what was our childhood memories like. So we shared that. We had one circle which was like 4 hours, just going around, and it was so interesting because we were talking about a positive topic. And so there's kind of this trust being built, but it was almost like seeing kind of the space in the circle that people are sharing funny stories and memories, and then within that, little conflicts would almost like bubble up between different people, but it was like a safe context for those little conflicts to be resolved. For example, my sister-in-law says that my brother he only talks about religious topics, so she's, when there's guests come, he'll only talk about this one topic, and then otherwise he doesn't talk. And then, so she's finding it hard to have friends over because he's not kind of engaging. So kind of that little problem bubbled up, and they kind of had a little dialogue about it. So, and all kinds of different interpersonal kind of conflicts came up within kind of this safe container. So it's a little long-winded, but
it reminds. I mean, we had a small experience yesterday where Edwin was listening to us and sort of being in this space of not sure what our role was, and I think the experience has been Edwin, that just that empathic listening itself helps resolve those problems. You know, sort of whatever is at the surface getting in the way of the relationship resolves itself in that space. And I think that's what happened yesterday too, when Lori and I were like, we got no clue what we're supposed to be doing to contribute, right? And you reflected and did what was sort of like a mini empathy circle,
Exactly, yeah.
and those feelings went away, and we were like, okay, let's move forward. So, you know, I think the experience that you're expressing is about how these things are resolved just in that space of empathy, right?
Yeah, that's marvelous what you're talking about, because this process in particular has very little structure, and it's very open-ended, and you get an idea, but you don't know if it's going to be brought to fruition. You don't know whether you should get attached to it or not. And you know, and we don't know, I mean, I don't know Edwin very well yet, and so we also don't have history. So there's not a lot of net holding us, you know, in this process. So it seems like empathy would be all the more important in terms of just feeling like, okay, yeah, I feel exactly the same, or I get that you feel that way, or, you know, so that you can continue to sort of think together and develop something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another tool came to mind, Edwin, when you talked about that, and I don't know that it fits into a reality show. It might, but there's this really interesting tool that's less psychological in some ways, or I want to say it's less activating. In other words, empathy circles, you repeat back what you hear. So you're having to digest what the person says and repeat it back. But if I'm super ticked off or threatened, or there's a lot of baggage or a lot of history, if you've done any couples counseling yourself or been in the shoes where you actually do it, you'll see that it's amazing how impossible that is in a very, very activated environment. It's like the wife will just feed it back with just the slight little sting. It's not really empathy. It's she's trying, but so there's this other technique, if it's really heated, that you can do that I have found really interesting. Like if you have a problem, I had this with my husband at one point. I was not happy where we were living entirely, and he was quite happy with where he was living, and we couldn't even talk about the idea of moving somewhere. And so we ended up just doing this process where you state the problem, or you state the topic, you say, so what is one thing that is important to you in the place you live? What is one thing? And then you say what that one thing is, and the other person just says, thank you. And then you ask them that question, what is one thing that's important to you about where you live? And you answer the question, and they say, and this just goes back and forth. So there's no digesting what the person's saying. There's simply like almost a namaste. You know, it's a thank you, you know, and so you're not guaranteed that the person totally gets what you're saying, but what you do is you have this space where you can continue to develop your whole list of things that's important to you that you're pretty sure that person isn't listening to or caring about, and you don't have to defend it. And so what happens is it starts to bloom like a flower. It's quite powerful, and what ends up at the end of it, at least my husband and I were, because he was more defended than me, because I'm a talker, right? I'm going to talk him out of everything he needs, right? At the very end, it was just like, wow, I think I know what's really important to him. I didn't have a solution, and that's the thing about empathy-based things, is they don't necessarily move to solution right away, but they increase capacity to tolerate complexity and to tolerate the fact that we're in something pretty big together, but at least we're together in it.
Yeah. I would imagine it brings about quite a bit of clarity too, right? As you sort of get really clear for yourself, and then he's getting really clear for himself.
Yeah, and I'm also aware that, the plan I'd schemed up isn't really going to quite work.
Well, it seems like it's a safe structure too. It's like that's what the empathic listening is. It's like a routine or a structure, you know, an agreed upon structure, and that structure can create a sense of safety as well. seems that I was
Yes.
talking with Bob Sorensen yesterday. He does, not a couple of days ago. He was talking about routines, really bringing in some kind of a regular routine into the family, and that's kind of like an area that he really works on. Something that's ongoing routine that this is the way the system works and the structure works, and it's a regular ongoing activity.
I think that's huge. Joan Durant's work on positive discipline in everyday parenting, she has one of the concepts is structure. And it's information about how things work, but it's also predictability. And I think in neuroscience, they talk a lot about anxiety can lessen if things are predictable. And that's why even negative things that we do that are kind of make our lives miserable, if they're predictable, they're almost better than even changing to something positive, because something you can't anticipate is even more anxiety provoking. So
Right.
ritual and routine is very, very
Yeah.
helpful in allowing the brain to predict. It loves to predict things.
One of the people yesterday, the filmmakers, we were talking about this, and he really liked like symbolizing, like if the family, like in our family, we had a moment where there was like a sense of connection, and then what they do for his family is they make some kind of a symbol of that deep moment of connection, and then have it up on the wall or something, so you can always reference back that this is this moment happened. Like for example, with my family, when we had like a breakthrough, that would have been like the perfect moment to have taken a picture. Like, and then just to kind of remember that, and every time you see it, you're kind of your not mirror neurons, but your neural networks are reminded of that experience, and it's like deepened or.
Yeah, it reminds you that you love this person. And to me, when I can remember that I love the person I'm in conflict with, I'm not so frightened and I'm not so harsh. It's really amazing. Yeah, right now we're not getting along, but there's this memory of a deeper net, a bigger experience where this person is driving me crazy and doing crazy stuff, but I know she or he loves me because I have this symbol, like you're saying, the symbol of wholeness, of connection.
I'm kind of having a couple of thoughts. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I forgot if I unmuted it. So I like a lot of what's being said, and I think I'm having a hard time rectifying, like, would the project be a family in therapy doing some of the things that we were just talking about and healing and that sort of aspect, or would it be, and this is sort of where I come from, because we're wrapped around a model. We're not married to our model. We, on our website, we promote other non-punitive, non-adversarial models, and we host a summit every year bringing together people from these different models. But I think I'm just a more structured thinker, that so, or are we looking at a family who's in their home being coached when they need it to be able to do a model that is empathic parenting. And you see I'm not articulating the difference, but I think some of the things we're talking about, definitely the family would need to start out in a family therapy type session, wherever that would be. I don't think families are going to necessarily do some of those things on their own, versus, and I'm really having trouble articulating this, but teaching a family, well, why they would want to be interested in being empathic in the first place, and why, all the things we've already talked about in previous webcasts about, the importance of working with your kids and not punishing them in the traditional sense. So teaching them an aspect, then teaching them a model, and then following them as they implement the model, and then coaching them as they need it to fine tune, and then watching them have their own successes. I'm not. I don't know. I just.
Are you kind of saying what is the arc of this? Is
think
it
so.
the family? Why are they going into doing empathy, wanting an empathic way of being in the family, kind of in the steps, and then how it kind of continues?
Yeah, I think I'm just looking for what are people's visions.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. So what does everybody envision for what would a show like this look like? I could just start with for me, it was just the Super Nanny framework was like the beginning point. And that show is, for some reason, the families come to her and say, we want you to come in and, we need help. And then they go in there and they have the team that's videotaping the whole dynamics within the family and kind of looking for all those points of conflict and stress and really sharing that pain and that dysfunction and the frustrations. And then Super Nanny comes in, and at that point it's like how to take what she's doing and bring in the empathy team or to have a different model of how that looks. And part of it's going to be listening to each family member, bringing them together to do maybe something like an empathy circle so that they start learning how to listen to each other, and then having like a toolbox of tools. Like I think it was Lori was mentioning how doing role playing, she would do role playing where the parents be the child, and then they would do some acting with they would be the child, and then that Lori just empathically listens to them as they are the child, kind of doing that kind of role play. So there's probably like a whole tool set of what could be like added is, something that adds a dynamic, entertaining, engaging, learning kind of quality to it. And then something maybe even set up where it's that sustainability. How does that sustainability go? And then that's where something like the listening partnerships with the hand-in-hand parenting type, where there's parents that would actually get together and kind of maintain and build on this. And so that's kind of the arc I'm seeing and showing different parts of that. And there's all kinds of different models of how that could be. Is it one family? Is it taking one family and doing like a series with them? So there's a lot of different possibilities, and it's like just kind of exploring them to see, maybe testing and seeing what kind of works is kind of the basic framework. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It makes sense to me, and when I know what collaborative proactive solutions is, because it's a marvelous therapeutic intervention. I've used it a lot over the years, particularly with really at-risk children. And it could be one of your big tool sets, because basically collaborative proactive solutions is how to talk and listen and have conversation with your children and problem solve with your children without the abuse of any power, which is so tricky because it sneaks in, and it can be really fascinating to have a coach in the background that kind of makes comments about what's going on. I also love the idea about the evolution of the family. I really like the idea of, because it is about attachment, they're just having a bunch of families switching out, and it's like, to me, it's about, I need as a viewer to get attached to this family, to relate to this family, to start to get connected. You know, where it lasts and I identify with them, and then that identification with that mother or father or child allows me to build empathy for the part of me that is like that. And so I'm co-experiencing this healing process and this educational process by just simply watching and getting attached and connected.
Mhm. I think I agree. I like the question, and I agree that attachment is a huge piece for viewers from like a practitioner standpoint, or I guess a team standpoint. I think some of what can happen is when we find a family that wants to do this, we go in, and the very beginning, when we're conceptualizing what's going on for them, is their first empathy circle experience, that we're there, we're being empathic with them as they begin to tell us what's going on, and maybe the overlay of them telling us what's going on and is a visual of filming of parents seeing it online or wherever in the show, they're telling us, and they're showing it then when the film crew shows it, and we're empathizing and we're reflecting, um, and then we begin, like Kim said, to give them the skill set, which is, changing your view of your child. And you'll have to help me out, Kim. I can't remember the second one, but giving them those tools they need to move through that process. And the whole process is us empathizing with them and empowering them, and they're in turn empowering their children, and practicing. And then, like you said, sort of the evolution of the family. They go from this model to growing their skills. And it's time. So we begin, just like in therapy, we begin to step further and further away from doing it for them. And just part of that process is us empathizing and giving them the space to figure out what to do next. It's almost like doing the CPS model with the parents, right? And they're learning the CPS model by experiencing them themselves.
What's CPS?
Collaborative proactive solutions.
It's basically
collaborative problem solving.
it's an empathy model.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a model that teaches you how to not be passive, but not be authoritarian or to be using your power. But it's an egalitarian approach to solving problems by experiencing a you and me. We're in this together. And it's pure collaboration, and it means that you really take into account the child's experience and what they want and what they care about, and that has value, equal value, as your desires and what you want and what you care about. And so it's a very humanistic model that relates to children essentially as equal human beings, having equal human rights. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
And it builds trust.
Yes, and the goal is helping kids to build skills they don't have, and we know they don't have skills because they have behavior. So if we build in the skills, we extinguish the behavior, and it's through this collaborative process that we build the skills.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we'd be doing for parents too, right? They wouldn't be having these behaviors either if they had the skills. They wouldn't be yelling or swatting or punishing, because they want to do well too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that.
Yes.
It'd be really interesting. I hadn't been thinking of just following one family, but that is so interesting because you could get pretty deep, and it's not magic. So, so Nanny 911 or whatever her name is, she, I think she gets a positive response quickly, but it's not sustained in my mind. So
right.
The thing with the approaches we're talking about, it isn't a quick fix, and it's not going to happen overnight. So following one family for like a season or whatever, you're going to then be able, because you need the time for the parents to get good at the skills, and for you to see, because it's not just one conversation that fixes things. It's over time and follow up and follow through and trying different things, and so I'm grabbing on to that idea of the following one family, and then you can have time to work with the parents around what makes it hard for them in certain moments.
You can see.
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting.
You can see true evolution. And I also have this crazy idea that we'd have an empathy team so that behind the scenes, when the parents aren't part of the conversation, our own frustration, our own confusion, what the heck is going on? What do you see is going on? I'm starting to feel flooded. And I love the idea of like having a team, because if you're one clinician and you've got you've got two parents and a couple of kids, the ratio is 1 to 4. And in terms of staying regulated, that's very, very taxing. And I think that, that's the therapeutic model that we work with. But in a way, I don't think it's a very effective model. I mean, I think it has a lot of problems, because I think that the therapist has to be holding too much. And we know that there's a lot of vicarious traumatization in this field, and I think that's a big part of it. And I really love the experimental concept of having an empathy team so that um, you're not flooding the therapist. The therapist will probably be more effective in a certain way. And this has been tried out. I mean, in some facilities, they'll that have incredible resources, they'll have like 2 or 3 clinicians per child. And they do these really enriched, intense therapeutic processes for very ill children, and they do see incredible results because the density of regulation and health and empathy is sufficient to support the dysregulation and distress and pain of the person that's really suffering.
That's my sense too, is the team aspect, that there's almost like having empathy circles with the team talking about what's happening with them so that they become more connected and can, instead of having that stress, just being in an environment like that is very stressful when you're kind of just trying to hold it, and to be able to share that yourself, I think, is really helpful. And it could even be part of the show too. It's like the team talking about what they're experiencing. And that's the other thing with that empathy circle. It's not the facilitator in there only listening to others, but the facilitator is part of the circle. So they actually can share what's going on for them. So it's, I mean, there's the therapeutic model is often the therapist is just listening, kind of is a one way, and it seems to me that that's not even really giving the client a chance to learn the other side of the coin of being able to listen to others too. So they would need that they have practice there as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does.
I think it does. I think Irvin Yalom talks a lot about sort of bringing that genuineness into the therapy room as a way of being a mirror for the client, sort of, and how powerful that is. So.
Yeah, like not hiding behind competence, you know,
Yes.
but revealing your own confusion and having compassion for yourself and just saying, yeah, I'm confused, or I'm lost, or whoa, this is flooding me. I need to get a cup of water and walk a little because this is activating me, because I'm with you, I'm human, I'm feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of different methodologies for fostering empathy. One, I mean, there are studies about reading, so having like a curriculum of books, that are more empathy-based. Like, it seems like a lot of the TV shows, the stories are, good versus bad, and there's very little about, relationships, like the story of actually solving problems. And even the anti-bully stuff is set up as the bully is bad.
Right.
You got to kind of stand up and you got to beat up on the bully.
Yeah.
Kind of, instead of really, what's going on, bring the person who's, doing that into relationship. Seeing what their story, their background is, giving them the tools to really come from a different, be more wanting to create more empathic relationships themselves. So, and anyway, it's that reading part. There's been a lot of studies about that fostering empathy. There's been synchronized movement. One of the activities I do in like an empathy circle, we start or end with what is the felt experience that you have right now. So, my experience might be something like this. If I kind of translated the feeling into a physical emotion, and then I have everybody mirror that activity.
I love it. That's beautiful.
So we all go around, and it's like, okay, what's your? And this is, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of worked well with the kids too. With my
it feels
nephews.
good to do that, right?
And there's actually versions of it. Like, here's my felt experience, and like then we go around and you take it to the next step. Like if you're doing it, Robin, where would you take it? See, you're
I
moving
might
it.
mute. I might move
Yeah,
it a little.
you move it and you go around, and everybody
It's
takes
like we're
the
dancing
energy.
together. Oh, so beautiful, Edwin. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I'm going to use that in my work.
Well, we go
This is
around and
amazing.
everybody gets a chance to express their felt experience, and then everybody has to mirror it until you, as the person doing it, feel that everybody's got it, that everybody's,
Huh.
you've been heard in kind of a physical way, and that synchronization itself is supposed to be really good for fostering empathy. And I think it releases oxytocin. Synchronization releases oxytocin, so that's kind of calming.
Yes, and it's nonverbal, which is so great if you're getting flooded with words. And some of us are so verbally focused, but some of us are not, particularly children. Edwin, it's such a rich conversation today. I really appreciate being here. I need to close out. You might want to continue, but just because I have an appointment I have to make. But I look forward to the next discussion.
Great. Yeah. We could keep going for a little bit longer, or would you like to all end, or where's everybody else?
I can stay on for a little bit longer.
Okay.
Bye, you guys.
Nice to see you.
Bye, Robin.
Yes, talk to you later. Bye, Edwin.
Thank you. So other methodologies, or there's also touch. I've done some interviews. There's a woman in New Zealand. She has a program on physical touch in the schools. So she's from Poland, and she's talked about how the Anglo countries, New Zealand, Australia, United States, UK, are very low-touch countries, and that she's bringing in like a whole program into the schools of how to do safe touch, within the school, so the kids learn how to. They kind of are almost in a circle, and they're all giving each other, back massages, or learning how to just do like a simple hand massage. So there's, so that's like another thing too, is how to have that kind of safe physical touch, which is also really good for releasing oxytocin.
It's really good for families too, because I think so much we want to connect, and we think of tickling and making our children laugh in that way as connecting. But there's so much research that talks about how disconnecting tickling can be too, without even realizing it, and of course completely unintentional, because it still feels kind of like a power over. So I love that. Let's teach you some other ways you can connect through touch and to feel heard in ways through touch. I know one thing, in our family, working with my daughter, something that really helps her to feel heard and valued is to do collaborative artwork. So drawing together, she just finds it safe to talk, and it feels to her like a space of being heard. And it's, for me, really simple, kind of simpler than doing pretend play with her, which is something that Kim and I had talked about in one of our webinars. How that can feel difficult, but this sort of collaborative art is just feels good, and it's relaxing, I think, because there's not an expectation of performing.
What does that look like? What is the scene, and what happens in that?
We get one piece of paper and sort of a variety of drawing utensils. My daughter likes, Sharpies and markers and tape and scissors, and we have these like glitter gel pens, and she likes to bring in all them. Sometimes she just wants one, but sometimes she really wants them all. And she wants, like, I'm going to draw. Let's draw something, she'll say, and then we'll both draw something, and then she tells a story about it. So then there's a little storytelling aspect too. But in that process of drawing, sometimes she just talks about a challenge in her day, and I'm able to sort of nod and reflect, and she comes up with a solution in that space for how she wants to approach it. So it's Nice. So, like, I think it, I don't remember what day it was, but we were drawing, and she said, Mom, do you ever have people who like you more than you like them? You know, like that whole complicated friendship thing, you know, and she's young, and I was like, oh, I know that experience. And so I just sort of, yes, I know about that. And she just talked about what was going on, and I just listened, and we were drawing, and she said, I think it's okay for him to like me more than I like him, and I can just be kind to him. And I was like, you can. Like it was just such this, I mean, it took more than just a couple minutes, but that has been a really nice way for us to have those conversations too. So.
Yeah, something that comes up around that is Natalie Rogers, the daughter of Carl Rogers. I've talked with her, and she actually went into that art therapy kind of a area, and she has a video that shows that someone actually does art. They're working on art, and then they share what's coming up around the art, just about their experience, like while they're working on it. And she does the empathic listening for the person, like what's coming up around the art is kind of like a gateway. So there's a little bit of a overlap there too. That's a little bit more formalized, but this is what you're talking about, is just more casual.
It's more casual, and you don't need training. I probably use some words from like play therapy with my daughter, because that's what I'm used to doing, but I don't think you have to have it. I think you just, with those empathic listening skills like that we've been talking about, it seems to be enough.
Well, it seems that bringing in the art is something that can be really engaging too. Kind of the role playing, the acting, doing art, that there's and movement, that can be visually entertaining, engaging, I guess, as well. So that's something I was really looking at, like, how do we do that?
Children love the role playing too. I know Lori yesterday was talking about how she has parents role play, but if we allow children and parents to reverse their roles, that really can give parents a really good idea of how their children are seeing them, and vice versa. I mean, we want to encourage sort of this atmosphere of kindness, even in our authenticity. I'm not sure how that looks necessarily, but I know when we put children in those positions, when I'm like, Addie, what would I do in this situation? Sometimes I go, oh my gosh, I maybe should try that differently. She's not at all getting the message I was hoping for. So that, I think that role playing could be, yes, it has that engaging quality for the audience, and also that really therapeutic quality for the families as well.
Have you done that with your daughter, or?
I do it with my daughter, and I do it with
where she actually role plays you.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Usually I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But every once in a while I go, oh, I might need to tweak my response on that a little bit. Like, she's seeing it as way more controlling than I'm meaning it to be, or whatever. So.
Do you use role play, Kim, in your work?
When I'm coaching adults in how to do CPS with kids, then I ask, like, what would you say if the kid says this, or what would you say if the kid says that, or what's an example? If I am the kid and I say this, how would you drill for information? Because drilling is one of the skills we teach in the first step of CPS. That's probably the extent of it. It's a very cognitive behavioral model that sees incredible results, but it's very about cognition and thinking skills, and we view the lack of certain thinking skills as a developmental delay. And so it's really about assessing what skills we think kids are lacking what situations are coming up that kids can't handle because they're lacking certain skills, and then taking each situation one by one and working on it together to come up with a strategy. Sometimes when people first hear about it, they say, well, isn't that just fancy negotiation? And the truth is that negotiation is only one way to solve a problem. There's other ways to solve a problem. So if negotiation doesn't work for a situation, then that's not what you would pick to solve the problem. And then we find when we take each of those situations, or we call them unsolved problems, and we solve them by teaching skills through using the 3 steps of CPS, then we extinguish behavior because the kid knows how to do it differently now, and has gained some skill, so they don't have to use their default behavior because they haven't run out of ideas of what to do. And we teach, like Robin said, it's quite a paradigm shift, and kids really, their eyes bug out no matter what age they are when we say that their perception or their worry is equally as important as what mine is or the adult's is. Because in traditional discipline, the kid's perception or worry doesn't rate at all. It's, that doesn't matter. It's my way or the highway because I am in the power and I can do that. This is a very different model. You might not, if your child's having trouble going to school and it's largely over clothing choices, that's probably one of the least things that I care about, right? But I need to, in this model, I need to honor it as much as what my worry is. That you miss out on instruction, that you'll fall behind, that you'll be disruptive coming in to the other kids. And then folks will say, well, what if the kid doesn't care about your concern? And I'll say, well, I don't really need them to care about it. I just need them to honor it. And I'm modeling that I'm honoring theirs, even though I might not, quote unquote, care about it, but I'm giving it equal weight and I'm asking them to do the same. And we're partners in solving the problem because now we have 2 pieces, your concern and my concern. How can we work this out and come up with a win-win? In coming up with the strategies, we are actually doing skills teaching. So for example, if a kid has trouble with transitions and we're working on the one transition of going from the school bus, that would be a school example. So let me reverse it. Going from the school bus into the home, or maybe going from video games to bedtime or something like that. Whatever we come up with to solve that problem is now a strategy the kid has that is likely going to apply to other transitions. And now if it does, they don't any longer have trouble with transitions because now they have a strategy. If it doesn't, then we look at the transitions it didn't work for one by one and come up with a different strategy after we figure out why that one didn't work. So now they have strategies that mitigate the skill deficit.
Okay. So it sounds like there's almost like an agreement, or there's an awareness that everybody's needs or is equally important, and so somehow it sounds like you're bringing that in as I don't know, as a premise or an agreement or as an understanding, and trying to teach that this is and for, I guess, everyone to kind of have that agreement.
Yes, and I think that adults find that scary, that that we have to, that we're taking the kids' concern and giving it equal weight to ours. I think adults find that to be scary. And often adults will say, well, I don't know how to solve that problem when I'm taking the kid's concern with mine, and they don't need to because they have a problem-solving partnership. And I find that even little kids, like my 4-year-old comes up with some amazing ideas. She's a great brainstormer that I would never think of, but totally work for me. And, and teaching parents, you're still in control. You'll always be in control. That doesn't change, and you're not going to sign off on a strategy that doesn't meet your needs. You're going to make sure that whatever you pick is feasible and is mutually satisfactory to the both of you and has a good shot of working. And then the agreement is, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we're going to come back together to figure out what we missed, why it doesn't work, and figure something else out. And it's so calming to kids when they know that that's the agreement. So again,
Wow.
my daughter will say, like, we worked something out recently, and it had to do with getting in the car. I think that was the one. On Friday morning, she has a very hard time getting into the car for dance class, even though she says she loves dance class. And so we worked out some strategies, and when my husband came home, this was hours later after we talked about it, she said, "Daddy, here's the new plan." And she articulated the whole plan, and then she said, "And if it doesn't work out, we're just going to talk about it again and figure something different out." And I think that's so calming and reassuring. And, and it didn't work the first time. We came back together and tweaked it, and now it does work. We've had probably 9 really great Fridays in a row of no struggles getting into the car, and there was no punishment involved. She was, I think I wrote about it on our Facebook page, but her main concern was that, and I'm only telling you this because it's so funny to me. She said, "Mommy, I have a lot of work to do on Fridays. You know that." I was like, "Oh, I actually had no idea." But she was referring to her artwork and her playing, and she was having trouble stopping that to then get in the car for dance class, even though she likes dance class. It was a transition type issue, and she does err on the side of cognitive rigidity, just like her mother. So it's easy for me to empathize with that. It's a little harder for my husband because he doesn't have that skill deficit. He has others though, and as we all do, right? And so the world's going to be hard for her if I don't teach her how to live in the gray and deal with unpredictability and be able to go with the flow. The world's going to be tough, and it's not about never having her have to transition or never having a change that she has to deal with. I'd be doing a major disservice to her if I did that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And also not punishing her as a way to get her to do it, because that's also still not skill building.
Right.
One of my favorite things is, for me was saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't have to solve this on my own." Because what a huge burden it is to just be like, "Oh my gosh, this is one more thing I have to do." And instead going, "Oh, I don't have to do this on my own."
When I learned the model, I was working in residential care, and I was not a parent yet, and residential with teenagers, and I always had a hard time feeling like I had to have the answer, because a lot of the times I didn't. And this model gave me permission that I didn't have to have the answer, that we could come up with it together, or we could ask for help if we could define the problem but not quite get creative enough to solve it. But again, I find that kids who have the skill to brainstorm, because that is one of the thinking skills that is on we have an assessment, it's on our list that you need to have to be a good problem solver. As long as they have those skills, they come up with things that I never would have thought of, but I'm totally fine with. And I remember one thing, and I always talk about this kid because it really taught me a huge lesson. He was having trouble brushing his teeth at twice a day, and to me, like, that's a no-brainer. Well, you just have to, you just have to brush your teeth twice a day. It's just very important, and there's no way around it. When we figured out what his concern was, it was very sensory related. The toothpaste was too strong, the bristles were too hard, and once we listened and honored that, and then said, well, for us, we're worried about oral health, we're worried about social consequences with bad oral health, and we're worried about that, bad oral health leads to painful and expensive dentists. And so how are we going to work this out? And so we experimented with different kinds of toothpaste and different kinds of toothbrush, but I remember our nurse saying, I'm fine if, like, at night he just wants to eat an apple before bed. That will take a lot of stuff off. Or we could get those baby wipes that you put on your finger and go like this. Like, that will actually meet our concerns and meet his. So until we found the right toothpaste and the right toothbrush, because that took a little time, we implemented those other strategies, and I was like, wow, like, I didn't even know that there was an alternative, and do I love it? No, it's not great, but it was definitely going farther than not brushing at all. And even though it was a residential program, we're not going to restrain the kid because he's not brushing his teeth. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Right. And so it's not going to be forced, so let's take a step back, let's take a deep breath, let's figure out what's hard about it, let's factor in what we're worried about and how creative can we get, to solve the problem.
I so wish I knew about this model when I was working in a adolescent treatment hospital.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
talk about traditional discipline, right? It's,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah.
The
So,
part that's coming up for me around that is the kind of that part where you're having an agreement. It's like you're almost like making an agreement that we're going to have this kind of a relationship. It's going to be we're going to have kind of this uh, everybody's needs matter agreement, that everyone
Hmm.
gets heard, and that we're going to be working on the strategies. And I wonder about the empathy in the agreement, because that's something I've been thinking about that could, what I want to test out with my family is, can we make like an empathic family agreement? Say, here is the agreement, almost a little bit like a constitution, I guess, that this is what our intention is. We're going to have an empathic, way of being, and here's and maybe having like clause, and not being so structured, but a clause of, yeah, everybody gets heard, or I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like it's
Hmm.
yeah,
that basic, but it's a
one,
very explicit and conscious agreement
Hmm.
for this way of being, and that we actually go over it, negotiate it, have a little bit of a signed contract. Maybe that's too much, but something that.
well, I coach adults to be it's a very transparent model, which I love. So if you're confused as the adult, you can say, I'm really confused because what you just told me, that didn't happen that way yesterday. So what do you make of that, you know? Um,
Hmm.
but I coach adults to educate kids that they are trying something different with them. When I'm working with schools, I'll say, if you say to a kid that it's occurred to us that all these detentions are not actually helping you, you get the kid's attention and you can say this, I'm learning something new, bear with me. And what it involves is me asking you some questions because the first step to CPS is called the empathy step, where we're grounded in the philosophy that kids do well if they can, which is different than kids do well if they want to. And kids do well if they can implies that if they could do well, they would do well, and we have to get curious when they're not doing well. So step one involves us caring enough to be curious and figure out what happened and what the kid's thinking was. Um, and for little kids, we play a more active role in that because they're less able to articulate. And frankly, for some older kids, they're not able to articulate. So it depends on the kid how active a role you play in that. And so explaining to kids, it involves us asking you some questions because we can't help if we don't understand and we'd like to help. And then it involves us telling you what we're worried about. And then it involves us thinking through your worries and my worries and how creative can we get so that nobody loses. Because nobody here has to lose, and it's quite powerful.
Hmm. It is really powerful. And I think that as they grow in their abilities in this model, their empathy also begins to grow because they're beginning to change their view of their children and their view of themselves and their role as parents.
And frankly, the empathy that the kids can express tends to grow too, although
Yeah.
demonstrating empathy is one of the skills we list on our assessment that
Hmm.
can be lacking. But, we say plan A or traditional discipline, we call it plan A. Plan A begets plan A. If kids are getting
Yeah.
traditional discipline, you're going to get that back from them.
Yes.
Um, in fact, when we've made some missteps with my daughter, and she will say something like that back, or actually she goes to school and they do X's, which drives me nuts. And
Oh,
she'll
yeah.
say, if she's unhappy with me, I'm giving you an X. I'm like, really? Yeah. So, but if you do Plan B, which is collaborative and proactive solutions, you'll get that back.
Yeah.
And um, it's amazing, especially in facilities and schools we've seen, where kids will calm each other down because they'll say, don't worry about it, you're not in trouble. The
Yeah.
teacher's just going to talk with you and help you figure it out. You're just having a problem that you don't know what to do, and the teacher's going to help you. And that's amazing
It's
when that
so
happens.
amazing. Can you
Mhm.
imagine schools like that? It'd be so awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Well, and one of our biggest pieces of research comes out of juvenile detention in Maine. They were noticing several years back that they had like an 82% recidivism rate. So the biggest traditional discipline that you can get as a juvenile in Maine was not working for kids
Right.
because they were coming back.
Right.
Plus their detention, their their seclusion and restraint rates were sky high. So they implemented CPS, and it takes quite a bit of time to change a culture. It's a
Mhm.
180-degree shift. And last I heard, their recidivism rates, they went from the worst in the country to the best in the country. They're down in the low
Wow.
20%, and they don't use seclusion, and I don't
Oh
think
my
they're using
gosh.
much restraint either. Took a lot of work and a lot of time, and they need refreshers now and again, but that's a really big piece of work that we like to point to because it's jail. And
It's jail.
yeah, and they said what we're doing isn't working. We need to
Mhm.
look at kids differently. We need to teach them skills so that when they leave here, they don't do the same behaviors that got them here. They don't have to if they have new skills.
Mhm.
And that's,
So it really
very much
shows the
true.
benefits of it
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
It's like I was wondering for the show, like if see the arc of a show, if there's like a point of agreement, there's some kind of an agreement made that like this is what we want to do, and there's a bit of a maybe a ritual or a symbolism around that. I'm just kind of wondering what you
I
think
suppose there
about that.
could. I think the reason why I coach people to be transparent with kids about it is because if kids have gotten a lot of traditional discipline, they are not going to talk in the empathy step, and you
Yeah.
need them to talk or express themselves in whatever way that looks like. We work with nonverbal kids too, but they're gonna shy away. They're not gonna speak their truth,
Mm-hmm.
and you need that in order to
Mistrusted.
actually right. So that's why I'll tell people be explicit. You're thinking about them differently. You're
Mm,
thinking that taking their privileges away hasn't actually done anything for them, and you're trying something new. And as much as depending on the kid, describe it if you want to, in
Mhm.
whatever way they can learn. But when I do coaching for schools, they have to submit audio recordings of themselves trying CPS with kids, and then I listen to them and give them feedback. And so many times, kids of all ages will say on the recording, "Wow, I really liked that. Thank you. I feel like you're really helping me." It's amazing, and they're not paying them to do it, and I just chuckle because even if kids are not saying that, that's what they're thinking because it is so
Yeah.
different and so much kinder and so much more
Mhm.
productive and so much more relationship building.
Mhm.
Um, when you're increasing the likelihood that if your kid messes up, they're going to tell you, as opposed to try to hide it to avoid being in trouble
Right.
and feeling the sting of that. And I can see that with my daughter. Like she'll say she confesses all kinds of stuff, like stuff I don't even care about. Um, but she's just like, "Oh, mommy, I broke that," or "Oh," and I'm like, that's fine. We'll work it out. It's okay,
mhm.
because especially when she's a teenager, I want to know if
Yes.
she's in trouble because I want to help, and I don't, I want her to get the message that she won't
Yeah.
feel the sting of punishment if she tells us that something
Right.
bad happened.
Well, I've been. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, it's so like in Kim's family and our family, we've created sort of this culture of how things work. And I think going back to what you had asked, Edwin, and that I don't know if we need an explicit document to sign, but I think we'll need to create space when we're working with parents. So, like when we're working with families in particular, we might say, I hear you want to say something. Bob is still speaking, and you can have a turn when Bob is done. And so you're just sort of creating that space, and as they learn it, because even if we wrote it down and they signed it and we talked about it, we're in such a habit of interrupting that it's just kind of about practice and sitting in there
Mm-hmm.
together and allowing space and having empathy for them wanting to interrupt, but then holding that while this other person finishes. I know you can't see my hands, but
I see him.
um, um, so I think it's worth bringing up and then allowing them to just learn it through experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, I think
Yeah,
that
so
sort
it's
of
kind of,
speaks
it's
to what you
like,
were
I
saying.
guess there's a different, like, different approaches. One, what I was hearing there is it's just letting it kind of evolve. It is as the facilitator, kind of holding the way of being, and so it's like kind of implicitly modeled in a sense and held versus kind of being very explicit and kind of more formal. It's almost, I don't know if it's like rules based, or I don't know what a constitution. So there's kind of like maybe a spectrum there, but it's like you're coming down on the just hold the space with the intention,
right.
and don't.
And I think if you focus on the parents and change their dance steps by changing their lenses of how they're viewing the kids' behavior, the kids' dance steps are going to change because you're changing the parents, and that tends to be how we focus, you know. And I'm reminded of a 17-year-old kid who transferred into a high school that we were working in, and the vice principal showed me this kid's rap sheet, like, you know, reaches from wall to wall in my dining room here, and said, what are we going to do with him? And I said, well, we're not going to wait for his behavior to emerge because we can be assured it will. Why don't we bring him down? And so he came into the office, you know, hat over his eyes, slumped in a chair, and he said, the first thing out of his mouth was, take anything you want from me, I have nothing left anyway. And we said, actually, that's not why you're here. You know, what we can see by this report is that there are many things about the school day that you have trouble with. And we don't blame you for that. Every kid has strengths and weaknesses. What we'd like to partner with you to understand the different parts of the school day that are hard for you and see if we can work some things out around each one. And I saw his eyes at that point, and he was like, huh? So we figured out each part of the school day that was hard. We did CPS, we figured out solutions for each part of the day. And a couple months later, this kid had no office referrals, and he brings his brother down and says, you got to hear this, and they got to tell mom and dad about this. 17, you know, 17-year-old tough guy. You know, so when the adults change their dance steps, the kids do too. You know, even the ones that look hardened and that they can't be reached, it's amazing when you see the life come back in their eyes, when you think about them differently and they can feel it from you. So we spend a lot of time building parents' empathy by explaining why shifting lenses is important and how to do it, and providing them a way to think through what they see with their kid, and then the model for how to respond. But we spend a lot of time on philosophy because you can't really do a model in a meaningful way without being grounded in the philosophy. So that's kind of how we approach it.
So in that way, then, it's very explicit. So you're giving some really explicit, these are sort of the rules, this is how it works, and then sort of having that experiential learning piece as well.
I feel a little torn. On one hand, I'm wanting to have that agreement, and on the other hand, I can viscerally feel the tension that comes up within me to have that, to kind of put out, to have that agreement. So I feel kind of emotionally torn around that.
I mean, I don't even like to use the term rules. So if I were to sign that, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's just one more way I'm going to fail. So, I mean, that's sort of my, you know, we would talk about it, and this is, sorry, there's a bug. It's worth talking about and saying this is what we're working towards, and just making sure the understanding is that we're not blaming parents or shaming. This is building skills, maybe.
Well, you know, with the empathy circle, the way that I start the circle is I set the intention. I say, the intention for this circle is that we're going to create an empathic environment, and that means that everyone can connect with themselves, to want to foster your own self-connection, for you to feel fully heard within this circle, and that everyone can be fully heard to the extent that they want to be heard. Does that work for everyone? And then everybody gives a thumbs up. So there's a little bit of an agreement that comes up there. And then at that point, I say, okay, so we have this agreement. That's what our intention is. And then I bring out a candle, and we light a candle that sits in the middle of the room to kind of hold that intention. so that there's like a symbol of our intention is for everyone to be heard, and for an empathic environment. And then when the circle is over, we say, okay, we had our intention, and our candles are, now let's blow our intention to create more empathy out into the world. And everybody seems to love this part. They all get up, and together they blow out the candle, and it just feels like a nice kind of a completion to the circle.
That's really nice. I like that for adults, and with children, especially younger children, the candle will be a really difficult distraction. I'm all like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do that with adults. And then I'm like, oh yeah, my kid would be wanting to blow it out all the time. And but
okay, we've gone for about an hour and a half, so we probably should wrap up. And I think our attention was an hour and a half for this one, so great.
Yeah.
I think we really kind of covered. I'll take all this and kind of make notes and an outline of it, and start forming it into a little bit of an outline, and organize it a bit to start laying out what a intervention could look like, and start putting together maybe a toolkit of that. And then I think the next step is just to start looking for. Oh, what?
The team, maybe?
Yeah, the team, and start trying some steps, actually, see what we could actually do. So,
Yeah.
Edwin, I'm going to send you, on our website, we have what we call a walking tour for parents that takes each aspect of the model piece by piece. Some of it's audio, some of it's video. And just to give you more of a sense of our model anyway.
Okay, great.
And we also have a page that has other models that are non-adversarial and non-punitive, so I can send you those links.
Okay.
That's the walking tour link right there.
Oh, thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
Oh, get that.
I had it up because I was going through it earlier from my message to you.
Yes, that's right. So. Good, I hope you find it helpful.
I've been through it once, but I'm like, okay, I'm really going to take more time with the videos. And
I find, I'll reread the books, I'll relook at the videos, and I'm always picking up something new. In fact, I was just saying to him, I got to go listen to him live again, because he fine-tunes the model often, like he's describing the philosophy differently these days, so I want to go hear it live and, just to be...
Is that most recent one?
The most recent what?
Video?
He is describing the model a little bit differently, and that aspect of it is not contained in the videos.
Okay.
The main change is that he talks about the fable of the people who live downstream and the people who live upstream, and how the people who live downstream are, furiously trying to handle all the problems that are washing downstream, and and if we liken that to our work, that kids with behavioral challenges are downstream, and we're trying to pull them out of the water, we're furiously trying to do different things, but we are not necessarily stopping to think about how they got pushed in upstream to begin with.
Yeah.
So if we go upstream and look at what's going on upstream, and that's our language is lagging skills and unsolved problems, then we can prevent them from being pushed in the water in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I love that metaphor. I use that too.
Yeah, it's a really powerful one, and it brings people along faster in that 180-degree shift of thinking.
Yeah.
Like looking at behaviors downstream, looking at what's behind behavior is upstream, and I'd rather be upstream. It's more productive.
It's proactive, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. All right.
Well,